Hi, friends. So, what I want to talk about today is how we can start to own our superpowers rather than allow our superpowers to own us. So, what do I mean by our superpowers owning us? Well, what I mean is that often when we decide to get really, really good at something, whatever it is, often that decision is made from a fear based place. It's made from a place of believing that if we don't decide to be this certain way, then we're no longer going to be safe. We're no longer going to be worthy of love or belonging. And when we decide to get really good at something from that fear based place, yes, there is this shadow side of that talent that we develop, that superpower that we develop. And there's also this shadow side. And until we really deal with the shadow side, we're never able to fully own the side that is the light. So often our superpower and our greatest weakness are two sides of the same coin. And when the other side of the coin is in a blind spot for us, like when we don't own up to and see and admit to the shadow aspect of our superpower, then we're not actually consciously choosing our superpower, and it actually has power over us. It has superpower over us. So that's what I want to really look at today. So I want to give some examples of this just to start off so that maybe you can start to inquire into where this correlation could exist in your own life, right? So for example, one of my superpowers is being a leader. So I walk into a room full of strangers and immediately I feel that I am the one that is responsible for leading everyone in cohesiveness, for leading everyone in connection, for leading everyone in discovery. And one of my dear friends pointed out to me recently that she loves that about me and she sees it as a superpower of mine. And I laughed when she said that because I let her know that although it probably looks like a superpower from the outside, it has been a source of so much pain for me in my life. Because when I decided that I was going to have to be the leader was when I felt so hopeless and so helpless as a young girl. And I didn't think that anybody else was going to do anything about my situation. So I decided, well, it's up to me. And I'm in this alone and I have to do it alone. And it's only up to me. And if something bad happens, then it's my fault that something bad happens. So that superpower of being a leader was actually birthed from this place of fear, from this place of shadow. So I believed that I have to be a good enough leader to prove my worth and to prove my belonging. So it really came from this place of shame, trying to overcompensate for my perceived inadequacies. And so when I walk into a room and I automatically take the role of leadership, for me, it occurs as a very lonely process. It's a very lonely role for me because while I'm up there leading this group, everybody else in the group is getting to bond with each other and connect with each other. And they can even comment on my leadership and use that as a way to bond with each other. So the presenting side is the superpower side. The presenting side is the light, is the look at me, look at what a fantastic leader is. On the other side of that coin for me is the loneliness, is the feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, is the feeling of I have to step up because if I don't, nobody else will. And so often when I choose to lead, it comes from a place of stress and fear. That's my default. So I really have to be very conscious when I'm choosing to lead. I have to be very conscious of what part of myself it is coming from. Is it coming from my nourished self really wanting to contribute? Or is it coming from this perceived lack, this perceived scarcity of nobody else is going to do it, so I have to in order to stay safe, right? So that's one example. Another example is I have a friend who's a really incredible listener. She's just the best listener. Everybody has breakthroughs when they are listened to by her. Right? And so when I compliment her on, you're such an incredible listener, it's so amazing to be in the presence of your listening. And she laughs and she says, well, that's awesome that for you it occurs as a superpower, because for me often my being an incredible listener is a defense mechanism. It's a way that I deflect actually being seen, because I know that I can keep people busy with questioning them for hours and hours and hours, and it's my way of turning the attention towards them and away from myself. Right? And then I don't have to answer questions. I don't have to fully be seen. So it's part of my defense mechanism. Right? It's part of my not fully trusting people, not fully trusting that they'll get me if they really see me. Right? Another example of this is somebody who's incredibly positive, somebody who's incredibly grateful. Right? That's the light presenting beautiful aspect of it. And then the shadow side, the other side of that coin, is perhaps a sadness, perhaps a deep rage, frustration, or anger that is so intense that they don't want to go there. They don't want to tap into that. So the shadow aspect of that is really an unwillingness to go into the darkness, to be with the sadness, be with the fear, be with the anger. So again, two sides of the same coin. Or for example, those who are very, very funny or very intelligent. Often we use our intellect or our sense of humor as a way to preoccupy people so that they don't have to see what's really going on behind the curtain. So rather than really revealing what's alive for us, what's true for us, instead we make a joke about it, or instead we intellectualize it and say such intelligent sentences that we confuse the people who are listening to us, and they can't really get to what's actually going on for us because we've just sent them on a wild goose chase of trying to understand this incredibly intelligent or humorous story that we just told or sentence that we just said. Right? So the presenting aspect of that is great intellect or a great sense of humor, and the shadow aspect, the other side of that coin, is an unwillingness to fully be seen. To really be vulnerable. And the impact of that is not truly being able to connect deeply with others and fully receive love for who we are and feel loved for the depths of our being. So often these superpowers that we develop are a way that we deflect, that we push people away, that we keep them at arm's length. And one of the ways that you'll notice this is happening is if you complain about other people not being the way that you are. So if you're somebody who's super intelligent, right, and you complain often about, well, so-and-so is so stupid, they're so dumb, right? It's a way of keeping people at arm's length. Right? Or if, for me, the example I gave for myself, where I always feel compelled to lead and my superpower is my leadership, and yet I always complain about people not stepping up to the plate and feeling like I have to do it alone. Why isn't anybody else a leader? Right? Or somebody who's a great listener often complains like nobody else listens to me well enough. So again, this is part of the shadow aspect where the presenting side pretends one thing, and then what's behind the curtain, what's on the other side, really is complaining and frustrated and feels alone that we feel like we're the only ones that are able to be that smart, be that good of a leader, be that great of a listener, right? Be that creative, be that whatever. Right? And so there's this sense of loneliness and this complaint about other people. So if you're noticing that, if there's a persistent complaint that you have about others, really look at that, because perhaps what that complaint is telling you is that you really wish that you could be the way that those other people are being. Right? So when I complain about nobody else stepping up to leadership, what I'm actually saying is, you know what, I would really love to be led. And it's not fair that they allow themselves to be led when I don't allow myself to be led. So what that's showing me is what I want. It's showing me that I want to be able to receive more from others and to be able to witness others in their leadership and empower others in their leadership. So in that way, my complaint is kind of like a breadcrumb that's leading me to my expansion, to what I really want for myself. So we really want to look at, okay, this light side, this presenting side, this superpower that I have. What might be behind it? What might I be hiding? What might it be hiding from other people's view? What aspect of myself might I be using this one superpower of mine to overshadow? What might I be hiding about myself? Okay. So is it my vulnerability? Is it my sadness? Is it my grief? Is it my anger? What is it, right? And these ways of being that so let me back up for a moment. There's two ways that we can be. We can either consciously choose a way of being from an empowered place. For example, we can choose independence because that's so inspiring to us, the idea of being independent and strong. Or we can sentence ourselves to being independent and strong from a fear-based place, from a place of, if I'm not independent and strong, then something bad is going to happen to me. So now I must be independent and strong at the expense of my being nurtured, at the expense of me really connecting with others, right? So if we're choosing to be independent and strong from that place of fear, then it's not freely chosen. We've sentenced ourselves to that way of being. And so what we really want to look at here is, how can we freely choose? How can we freely choose now to be our strong suit, to be our superpower from an empowered place, not from a place of, well, I have to be, because if I'm not, then I'm not going to be safe. If I'm not, then I'm not good enough. If I'm not, then I'm not going to belong. Okay? And in order to choose this new way of being from a really empowered place, guess what we have to do? We have to be willing to be with all of those feelings that we have hitherto not been willing to be with. So if what's on the shadow side of your superpower is insecurity, if you're always the funny one because deep down you don't feel good enough and you feel like you have to make people laugh in order to be deserving of their attention, then in order for you to ever truly choose humor from an empowered place rather than a disempowered place, you have to be willing to sit with those feelings of insecurity and actually feel them and be there for yourself in those emotions. If what's on the presenting light side, the superpower side, is being a leader, I have to really look at what is behind that, what's in the background. What's my fear? That if I'm not a leader, then what? Well, for me, it's if I'm not a leader, then nobody's going to step up and then the job's not going to get done and I'm not going to be safe anymore. So what's actually behind my leadership often is feelings of not being safe enough within myself. So in order for me to really get to a place of choosing leadership from empowerment, from free choice, from free will, I have to be willing to sit with my own feelings of not being safe. Okay? Or if, again, your strong suit, your superpower, what's presenting, what's outward facing, is being a great listener, right? What's behind that? Is behind that anger that other people haven't cared enough about you, right? Is behind that insecurity about not feeling worthy enough of attention? What's behind that? And in order to freely choose from an empowered place to be a great listener, to be compassionate, to be of service, we have to be willing to sit with the other side of that coin. We have to be willing to sit with the shadow aspect of it and really see ourselves in that aspect, see that aspect of ourselves, which is not easy work. It's really messy, actually, and it's really challenging. For me, when I've really, really done the work of sitting with the parts of myself that feel afraid, the parts of myself that feel distraught and panicked, the parts of myself that feel disgusted at myself, the parts of myself that feel ashamed, angry, when I've really done the work of sitting with these parts of myself, it's intense. For me, letting those emotions up, it feels like sickness. Like it actually feels like sickness is moving through my body, which makes sense because we have to feel it to heal it. So if we imagine these compartmentalized parts of ourselves, these parts of ourselves that we've stuffed into a drawer, stuffed into a deep, dark cavern within ourselves and buried because we're afraid of what this part of ourselves means, right? When we think about that, we stuffed life force into a deep, dark, confining, constraining place. How do you think that life force feels? How would you feel? How would you feel if you were stuffed into a tiny, dark cupboard that is not big enough for you? You'd probably feel really afraid. You'd probably feel really alone. You'd probably feel not good enough. And the light would be so intense to you because you're so used to the darkness that the light would seem like death. So we have to know that is how these parts of ourselves are feeling. So when we are showing up for these long suppressed parts of ourselves, we have to hold that level of empathy, that level of space for them. We have to be that willing to sit with the discomfort, knowing that the more willing we are to sit with the discomfort, the more fully this energy will move through our system and the more free we will be on the other side of it. Harriet Tubman has this quote where she says, "I freed 1,000 slaves and I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." So that's what's happening. We are waking up to where we have enslaved ourselves, where we have sentenced ourselves to these ways of being, where I've sentenced myself to being a leader because I think I'm not safe if I'm not a leader. Or I've sentenced myself to having to be an achiever, having to be high performing, having to be a great communicator. having to be high functioning. I've sentenced myself to these ways of being, having to be compassionate in every situation, right? And this is the prison of my own making, and we all have one of those. We all have a prison that we've constructed for ourselves because we believe that outside of those prison walls, we're actually not safe. So we feel safer inside the prison of our own making. So what's happening now is we're having this waking up process, we're having this coming to, where we're realizing all of the prisons that we've sentenced ourselves to. And the moment that we realize it can often be the scariest, right? Like when you wake up, you actually wake up and you realize that you're in a prison. That's the scariest moment. And it's the most powerful moment. Because in that moment that we realize that we're in a prison of our own making, that is the moment that we can choose our freedom. Until we become conscious of how and where we've put ourselves in prison, there's no possibility of freedom. So realizing that we have shackled and chained parts of ourselves, stuffed parts of ourselves deep down to dark places because we think that we have to in order to stay safe, in order to be deserving of love. Realizing that, waking up to that, and then holding such compassionate space for those parts of ourselves as they start to come out of the prison that they've been locked in, knowing that they're going to be so afraid of the light. Because when all you know is darkness, when you've known darkness for so long, the light is really scary. And you are strong enough to hold space for that part of yourself. And no one else can do it for you. No one else can feel it for you. Only you can let it in. No one else, no one else. Truly, thank you, Natasha Benningfield. Truly, you are the only one that can rebirth that part of yourself. Others can hold space for you. Others can encourage you. Others can guide you. And no one else can do it for you. It's like when we're pregnant with a child. We can have others supporting us, but we're the only one that can push that baby through. So really looking at what's behind our superpower. What's the part of ourselves that we've been using our superpower to hide from others? We've been blinding others with our superpower, with the super high power light of our superpower, blinding them so that they can't see our weakness, so they can't see what we're really truly struggling with, so they can't really contribute to us. And when we realize that, it's time to hold space for that scared part of ourselves to integrate back into the whole of who we are. And once we've done that, once we've integrated the shadow aspect, then we can freely choose our superpower from an empowered place. Then we can choose our intellect, our sense of humor, our talents, our great listening, our leadership skills, our communication skills. We can choose it from a place of genuinely, authentically wanting to be of service, because that's who we are. That is the authentic expression of the light being that we are, rather than from a place of, I have to be these ways, or else I'm going to lose love, or else I'm not going to be safe, or else I'm not going to belong. So it's such a powerful shift to get to choose our superpower for ourselves consciously for the first time in our lives, and no longer feel that we have to be that way, because we know that if we aren't our superpower, we're okay, and we're safe, and we're still worthy, and we're still lovable, and we still belong. To really get that gives us the freedom to choose who we be from an empowered place, a place of juicy, excited creation, of inspiration, getting to create who we want to be in this world. So that's what I have to offer you all. I'd love to hear feedback, what you got out of this, what you saw for yourself. Thank you so much for watching and listening.